You are pretending to be yourself. Stop for a second and contemplate that. How many times today did you say something you didn't really think? Laugh at a joke you didn't find funny? Agree with something just to avoid the discomfort of conflict? If you found your way to this video, something within you has already begun to awaken. You feel like you're living on autopilot, following a script you never consciously chose. It's like being at a party full of people and feeling completely alone, or being in the middle of an apparently important conversation and realizing that the words sound completely empty, like echoes in an endless valley. This is the first sign of awakening. Most people live their entire lives without questioning the invisible manual they received. Work to impress, speak to be accepted, compete to have value, complain to connect. They follow this script like actors who have memorized their lines, but forgotten they are performing. But you have begun to question. And once you see through the fog of collective unconsciousness, you can no longer pretend it doesn't exist. Prepare yourself for deep reflection, because what you will discover in the next few minutes may completely transform how you perceive the world and your place in it. When someone begins to awaken, something subtle and natural happens. They gradually distance themselves from the crowd, not out of anger or bitterness, simply because the habitual forms of connection stop making sense, like a song that once sounded melodious and now seems out of tune. Contemplate for a moment. 80% of daily conversations revolve around three elements: complaints about external circumstances, gossip about absent people, or subtle disputes over social status. Each interaction becomes a carefully orchestrated performance to gain approval, recognition, or simply to avoid the silence that haunts the restless mind. Alan Watts observed something profound about this phenomenon. He noticed that the constant noise of superficial conversations reflects our Western inability to simply feel the present moment. We are always talking about yesterday or tomorrow, always commenting on life instead of living it. This constant social noise becomes an escape from immediate reality, a resistance to the present moment, which is the only thing that is truly real. He doesn't hate people. He has simply stopped pretending that conversation about the weather is genuine connection. He hasn't become antisocial. He has simply stopped filling his schedule with empty commitments just to avoid being with himself. Observe how this transformation happens gradually, like dawn that doesn't announce its arrival. First, he stops laughing at jokes he doesn't genuinely find funny. Second, he stops automatically agreeing just to maintain artificial peace. Finally, he stops seeking approval in every interaction, like a flower that stops constantly turning toward the sun because it has discovered it has its own light. The result is a natural, organic distance. He is still courteous, still greets people, still shows up when truly necessary. But that superficial chemistry that existed before, which was actually just mutual performance, simply fades like morning mist. And this can be disconcerting initially, because you realize that many of your social connections were sustained by this collective charade. Remove the performance, and what remains? Silence. But it is in this silence that something profoundly powerful begins to emerge. Here lies one of the greatest confusions of the awakening journey. People observe someone spending more time in solitude and automatically diagnose. He is isolating himself. He has lost his social skills. He must be depressed. But there is a chasm between isolation and solitude that needs to be understood. Alan Watts made a luminous distinction about this. For him, solitude is not an absence of people, but the full presence of oneself. It is the sacred space necessary for self-discovery, where you can finally hear your own voice without the constant noise of external opinions. Isolation is fleeing from people out of fear, insecurity, or resentment. Solitude is consciously choosing your own company because you have discovered that it is not only good, but essential for your inner growth. Reflect on this. How many people do you know who cannot remain 5 minutes alone without compulsively picking up their phone, turning on the television, or calling someone? They fill every second of silence because silence confronts them with something they prefer to avoid, themselves. But one who awakens develops a completely different relationship with silence. He discovers that silence is not a haunted void, but a space filled with clarity. It is not uncomfortable. It is deeply peaceful. It is not a sign of social failure. It is evidence of genuine emotional independence. In authentic solitude, you finally come face to face with the person you will spend your entire life with, yourself. And discovering that you genuinely appreciate your own company is one of the most liberating experiences of human existence. This doesn't mean avoiding people or becoming a hermit. It means no longer depending on them to feel complete, whole, validated. Solitude transforms into a sacred refuge, not a solitary prison. And in this contemplative space, something precious develops, authentic self-knowledge. And then comes the moment of clear vision, as if someone had cleaned a dusty window that you didn't even realize had been dirty for decades. He begins to see that most conversations do not represent a genuine exchange of ideas or feelings, but tacit agreements of mutual comfort. I will validate your perspective if you validate mine. I won't question your beliefs if you don't question mine. It is a system of emotional security based on shared illusions. Here, Alan Watts's ideas become especially relevant. In his book, The Wisdom of Insecurity, he argues that our constant search for security is paradoxically the main root of modern anxiety. These empty conversations, these tacit social agreements, are desperate attempts to create a sense of security in a universe that is inherently uncertain and constantly changing. Social groups form not around authentic values, but around shared insecurities. The group of those who eternally complain about work, the group of those who compete for status through possessions, all trying to create an island of certainty in an ocean of uncertainty. In social gatherings, the patterns become crystalline. The person who monopolizes all conversations because they fear silence, the one who agrees with absolutely everything to be accepted and loved, the one who turns every topic into an opportunity to talk about themselves because they desperately need to feel seen. On social media, the performance becomes even more obvious. Each post meticulously calculated to generate a specific reaction. Each photo edited to project a life that doesn't exist in reality. Each comment a subtle search for validation or an attempt to sound intelligent and relevant. And perhaps the most profound realization: Many of your own opinions are not truly yours. They are perspectives passively absorbed from the environment, family, friends, media, opinions you have never genuinely questioned or contemplated in silence. But it is in this recognition that true inner transformation begins to flourish. First, he naturally stops seeking approval constantly, not in a rebellious way, but because the compulsive need simply dissolves, like salt in water. The fundamental question changes from, "What will others think of me?" to, "What is genuinely true for me?" Second, he develops what we might call a more robust emotional stomach. He can digest uncomfortable moments, tensions, conflicts, without the immediate need to vomit them out in the form of drama, complaints, or desperate search for external relief. His priorities reorganize organically, like a garden that finds its natural balance. Things that once seemed urgent, like a certain person's opinion, the latest family drama, or the need to always be updated with controversies, gradually lose their hypnotic importance. He begins to invest his precious energy only in what truly matters, relationships that nourish his soul instead of draining his vitality, work that has purpose and meaning, not just a paycheck, conversations that elevate and edify, not just fill empty time. This transformation doesn't happen without its contemplative challenges. There are moments of sincere doubt. Am I becoming cold and insensitive? Am I losing my natural capacity for human connection? The contemplative answer is no. What is happening is that he is becoming more selective, more conscious. He is trading quantity for quality. He is choosing authentic connections instead of superficial interactions. He learns, through contemplative experience, that not every battle deserves to be fought, that not every conversation needs to be resolved or concluded, that not every relationship needs to be artificially maintained, and in the sacred space created by these conscious choices, something beautiful and rare emerges. Genuine authenticity. Finally, he can be completely himself, without apologizing, without diminishing himself, without performing for an invisible audience. But here lies one of the deepest ironies of the journey. When you authentically transform, the world around you often feels uncomfortable and threatened, even though your change is unequivocally positive. Why does this happen? Because your silent transformation indirectly questions the choices and patterns of others. Your authenticity becomes a mirror that reflects others' inauthenticity, and this generates discomfort. Typical reactions manifest as accusations disguised as observations. You've changed, they say, as if change were inherently negative. You're distant, when in reality, you have simply stopped pretending intimacy where it genuinely doesn't exist. You're not fun anymore, when you simply no longer find humor in the same empty and repetitive jokes. You think you're better than everyone, the most common accusation, when in truth you have simply stopped diminishing yourself so that others feel more comfortable with themselves. Family can show special resistance to your transformation. They had a specific role designated for you in the daily family drama, and now you have left the script established for decades. This forces all other members to rethink their own roles, and this reflection is profoundly uncomfortable. Longtime friends may gradually drift away, not through dramatic confrontations, but simply because the fundamental basis of the friendship, perhaps mutual complaints or shared insecurities, no longer exists. And perhaps the most challenging part, a part of you may genuinely miss the way things were before. You may question whether this journey of authenticity is worth it if it costs so many seemingly significant relationships. But it is crucial to remember, relationships based on false, performative versions of yourself were not genuine relationships from the beginning. They were unconscious agreements of mutual performance. And finally, through all this contemplative journey, he arrives at a profound and liberating understanding. He does not need the entire world to awaken in order to feel complete and fulfilled. He does not need constant external approval to know deeply who he is. He does not need an audience to live his most authentic truth. The transformation is complete when loneliness transmutes into sacred solitude, when isolation transforms into genuine emotional independence, when others' misunderstanding converts into profound self-understanding. There is a peace that transcends understanding in being genuinely authentic, even when it means walking alone for significant periods. There is real and tangible strength in not depending on external validation for your sense of self-worth. There is an indescribable freedom in not having to constantly perform for an invisible audience. He remains open to genuine connections, still deeply values authentic relationships. But now, these relationships emerge from a solid foundation of personal integrity, not emotional neediness or lack. And in this contemplative peace, he makes a comforting discovery. He is not truly alone on this journey. There exists an invisible but real community of people who have made this same introspective journey, who consciously chose truth instead of comfort, authenticity instead of acceptance. You who are listening to these words now probably belong to this silent community. You felt the deep identification from the first few minutes because you intimately recognize this journey. You know, in your heart, that despite being sometimes solitary, it is the only journey truly worth taking. Because in the end, living a completely authentic life, even if it is frequently misunderstood by others, is infinitely more meaningful than living a false and performative life that pleases everyone but betrays your own soul. Authenticity always is worth whatever cost we may pay for it. As Alan Watts reminded us with such wisdom, the price of security is perpetual anxiety, but the price of authenticity is true peace. And this peace, once found, is a treasure that no one can ever take from you. If these reflections touch something deep in your soul, I would be honored to know how this journey is manifesting in your own life. Leave a comment sharing your experiences with this awakening of consciousness. And if you feel you are part of this silent community of authentic seekers, consider following this channel, where we will continue exploring together these contemplative territories of the human soul.